I'm Hannah from Answer the Public. Every month we're talking to industry experts from all different backgrounds, from SEO to PR, creative to consumer insights, about how you can use search data to read people's minds and make better business decisions. So we're going to be showing you lots of different tools and tactics about how you can use search data to get more from your search listening, but this isn't an Answer the Public tutorial. However, there is one of those over on our YouTube channel if you want to check that out at any point. So that's youtube.com/answerthepublic. We will be recording this session as well. So for everyone that's watching live, you'll get a recording along with some notes afterwards, and it will be added to YouTube as well. So today's conversation is all about using search data to support talent selection. So anyone that's working on an influencer project will really benefit from this session. And we've got two guests with us. So firstly, we're joined by David Boyle, who's the director at Audience Strategies. And we're also with Sophie Coley, who is our regular guest. And Sophie, some of you will know well, is the originator of the search listening technique and author of Consumer Insights in the Age of Google. So guys, can I hand over to you to introduce yourselves to everyone in the room? Perhaps David, you'd like to go first.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. My background's in data. I'm a giant data nerd, and I'm obsessed by how data can be really transformative if it's used in the right way. One of the things I really love doing is uncovering data sets or methods that are not widely used, but really should be. That's why I'm here today, because this particular data set, this particular way of thinking about the data that's out there, it can be completely transformative to huge businesses in the things they do differently. But at the moment, it's a well-kept secret. So let's ruin that, shall we?
Great. Thanks so much, David. And over to you, Sophie.
Hello. I'm trying to speak quietly because I've been told my mic's really loud, so apologies if I'm very loud, trying to speak softly. So I'm Sophie. I am Director of Strategy at PropellerNet, which is a search marketing agency, but I originally trained as a journalist. And if you've heard me speak on these webinars before, you'll know that I often say I think I've retained my nosiness or curiosity about people from my journalism days. And that's what really got me excited about search as a data set and the things that you can learn about people from how they search. So yeah, looking forward to chatting to David today. We've had some really great conversations in the lead up to this about some really cool use cases for search data. So yeah, looking forward to chatting.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. You'll see that we've got our Twitter handles on the screen now. So if you want to snap them, please do. It'd be great if you could get involved in the conversation on Twitter. So David is it B Glenn or?
It's Beglan, my middle name, which was good because it's available on every network, but it's bad because it just seems random.
That's great. Okay, thanks. And I'm at Answer the Public or at Hannah M. Foster, and Sophie is at Search Listening or at Coley Bird. And yeah, just ask questions. We've got time for questions at the end of the session. It should run for about half an hour to 45 minutes, and then we'll do about 10-15 minutes of questions at the end. Cool. So let's jump straight into the first question. What is it that you mean about identifying talent? And I guess, David, this one would be a good one for you to start with.
Yeah, we deliberately picked the word talent instead of the word influencer, which gets banded around and means absolutely everything. So I think of it through this lens, through the lens of talent. And let me give you a couple of examples. I'll give you a few different examples. So I've been working with a large festival organizer. Hundreds of thousands of tickets need to get sold for this festival. Who should be on the bill? Isn't that a good question? And if only we had a great data set that was available in every single country around the world for every single artist, then we could answer that question. For a 100-year-old in-person entertainment company, which celebrities should they partner with? And what's the relative value of a Hollywood celeb versus a TikTok celeb versus a day TV presenter? For one of the giant technology and media companies, one of the big four, branching into new areas of content. Journalists, should they partner with some journalists or some authors or some footballers or some football clubs? And how do you trade off those different entities or those different people? So many different industries. Like, what data set could possibly represent all those different industries? So I'm interested in decisions where you're trading off, hey, we need talent of lots of different types, of lots of different industries, and in thinking about different countries, and how do we make those kind of decisions? So that's what I mean by it.
Great, thanks. Have you got anything to add to that, Sophie? What would you say
No, just more typically, I probably play at the other end of the spectrum. And I think the really nice thing about what we're going to talk about today is the fact that you can apply everything we're talking about to both ends of this, from, figuring out which big names to work with, which organizations to work with, even, as David said, through to if you've got budget to work with a few Instagrammers for your account, actually, or for your campaign, who should you work with on that? Yeah, I just think keen to hammer home the point that what we're going to talk about works across the board, and should hold value for anyone working with talent in any context.
And we should probably add, I think the real secret here is the big problems that I'm solving are stealing methods and processes from the smaller problems that you spent years working on how to solve, right? Yeah. This is an example of taking an amazing tactical data set, tactical tool, and taking it into the boardroom. And that's really exciting, but the credit goes to the people who developed the tool and spent years working on it. I'm just stealing your great work.
You are, but I think you're getting it into the places where it should be used, which I think is probably one of the biggest challenges that exists around search data. I think anyone who, I don't know who's with us on the webinar today, but who works in a search agency or works in traditional search marketing will probably be really familiar with lots of what we talk about. But as you say, it's getting it to the right place in the business and making other stakeholders aware of the value of the data.
Brilliant, thank you guys. Okay, so then on to the second question. This one's actually a two-parter. So the first part is, how can you use search to help you identify and select talent? And then there's a part B, and then how do you combine search data with other data sources? Yeah, I don't know who wants to go first with that one.
So I think before this, maybe like why search? And for me, we want one data set which covers celebs of every single type in every single country, that's available over time, and that covers quite a lot of different needs. So viewing data is great, but that's only the need, hey, I want something to watch. Instagram data is great, but it's only the need, hey, entertain me while I've got a few minutes spare. Whereas search captures those things, but it captures so many other needs all together in one data set. So why search? Because it's the broadest and most comprehensive, not to mention the biggest of them all. I think how search, there's two big ways for me, and they're different and need to be thought about very differently. And in my experience, most people miss the first and spend loads of time on the second. The first is size, which is for the influencer or celebrity I'm interested in relative to a basket of other celebrities that I could otherwise work with or provide useful context for me to tell me whether the one I want to work with is big or small. So for mine versus a bunch of others, like how big are they? How has that varied over time? How has the size of the demand changed over time? And how does that vary by country? If I think about all the different countries that I can actually monetize my business model in, it's usually not global. It's usually a list of countries with a different size against each of them. So for a bunch of different talent, how big are they relative to a basket and in the countries I care about and over the time period I care about? That's the size, which is the first use case. I think that is almost completely separate. It should be optimized independently of shape, which is what are some of the trends and nuances within the search? What other words are people searching for alongside this person? What are the questions they're asking in search about this person, about this talent, or about this brand, which of course AnswerThePublic is a fantastic way of getting to. But I think people often jump to the second without doing the first, or they do the first maybe without realizing the second, or maybe they combine them and just end up with a bit of a mess of analytics. I think optimize the size, make a good decision on size, and separately look at shape, make a good decision on if it's the right shape of demand for you in the project you're working on.
Yeah, and I think my experience there is that, and certainly from doing these webinars for the past year now, a lot of people will default to the size question, which I think is fair, because as you said, it's a really important place to start, certainly. But obviously I'm slightly biased, but what I love about AnswerThePublic is the shape stuff that you can get and the fascinating trends and insights that you can pull from that shape data. And I say fascinating in as much as I know, I think it was Sam Gilbert, who we've had on a webinar previously, did some really interesting research last year or the year previous around politicians and how people search around female versus male politicians, and actually some quite depressing stuff in that, in as much as a lot more of the kind of shape stuff around female politicians is much more around their appearance and their weight and all of those very misogynistic things that we see in search data. But equally, there's some really interesting stuff in there. And I guess one thing I would always try and dissuade people from thinking is that people only search about people from an informational point of view, because again, that is very untrue. But moving aside from talent, but I see people type things like "I hate Disney" into search engines. So it's not just an informational thing. People will search for a whole different host of reasons, which, as David started this conversation with, is why search data is so fascinating, because you will capture those informational searches, but you'll also capture opinion type searches, people who identify with a certain celebrity and want to be more like them, all sorts of things. There's so much that goes on in search data. Yeah, in all honesty, I often say I work very closely with a guy, Jim, who's the other director of strategy at PropellerNet, and he is the size guy. He does a lot of the number crunching and figures out volumes around search data, where I'm really into the shape. But I think it's a really clean way to think of it, and I actually think both are as important as each other. It's just my brain likes the shape stuff a little bit more.
I think the reality is you need two types of brain on this, and you and your work partner illustrate that beautifully, which is that there's a bunch of really interesting maths and aggregation and statistics around size, and that's a maths brain problem. And then there's a bunch of really thoughtful, nuanced stuff around shape, which I do not go anywhere near. My brain doesn't work that way. I'm not the right person. But you have to have both. Otherwise, you're going to make some terrible decisions. And maybe to address, you alluded to the kind of concerns people have about search data and what it really means. To put those concerns to one side for anyone on the webinar who's worried about, I don't know about search data, there is now an irrefutable pile of evidence that shows search data is an incredibly good predictor of demand for whether it's mobile phone sales, car sales. I've done the same thing for television show viewership and music consumption and sales, new artists, established artists. It is irrefutable that this stuff is gold for prediction. The question is how and when, and that's what we're talking about today.
Great. And so I can just see that someone said, so how, in the questions, which we'll be coming on to in a second. Okay, so on to the third question. How can you use search data to measure the effectiveness of influencer or talent-led campaigns? So I guess this is on the kind of reporting side of things, and then we'll get on to the how-to afterwards. But I know, Sophie, you've got some interesting thoughts on this question.
Yeah, so this is something that I really like as a use case of search when working with influencers or talent. And this is the idea that you can use search behavior to indicate or to prove to your stakeholders that your partnerships are working and are really landing in public consciousness. And again, I touched on it earlier, but this works from A-lister celebrities through to Instagrammers, if you like, so the full spectrum. So on the left, if you're not aware, is Rita Ora, who certainly in the UK last year, I think, did a big campaign with the mobile network EE, where they created this strange AR version of her and had her sort of dancing and singing with herself. And on the right is an Instagrammer who I happen to follow in real life. Her name is Anna Newton, but she's known as the Anna Edit. And I just want to show you a couple of examples. So when we're talking about search data, and I think this comes back to the sort of size and shape piece that we were just discussing, the shape stuff, the kind of colourful, interesting stuff that I love to look through is literally Google's suggestions. If you're looking at this in an incognito browser or using AnswerThePublic to access this data, because that's what AnswerThePublic does, this stuff is really rich. You can think of this as trending searches around the word that you put in, and it will change on an hourly basis as consumer search behaviour changes, and Google reflects that back in the suggestions it makes. What you'll see here, I've just searched Rita Ora A, and you can see, I think third from the bottom, we can see Rita Ora Adidas, which is another partnership that I know that she has had. What this means is that the partnership she's got with Adidas has landed and resonated with people such that they are actively seeking it out. They're turning to Google to look for more information on the partnership, the products, anything around that, but they are actually actively choosing to go into Google and engage with it. The other really interesting thing here is that I've just typed in Rita Ora A, right? I could have been going to Google to actually type in Rita Ora Albanian or Rita Ora Australia. I believe she is currently in Australia. And I've not got that far because I've just typed Rita Ora A, but instantly Google is effectively suggesting to me that I may be interested in the fact that Rita Ora has a partnership with Adidas. So not only is the fact that this suggestion is appearing a proof point that the partnership is working very well, it's also like another chance to influence people and to make them aware of the partnership, because, as I said, someone could have been going looking for some lyrics to one of her songs, and actually this is coming up. And it's the same deal for her partnership with EE. If I'm typing Rita Ora E, I might be trying to look for information on Rita Ora in Egypt or her early life, but the first suggestion that comes up is EE advert. So that says two things to me. That says, one, this partnership is really working. People are interested in that advert because they're searching for it. And B, the very fact that it's coming up at the top of the suggestions is going to influence even more people to be interested in it, which is a great thing if I'm EE, right? I've spent a lot of money on that partnership and running that advert. I want people to be interested in it. And actually the fact that I'm almost getting some free awareness on it in the Google suggestions is a really incredible thing. And you see the same thing. So Anna Edit was the other example that I gave you. So a much smaller scale celebrity or influencer, if you like. Allies of Skin is a skincare brand that she's partnered with. And I think I've done something else here, but similar thing. So Anna Edit A, I might be interested in her age, her trip to Amsterdam, her applesauce, but equally it's going to suggest, the fact that Google suggests is bringing up Allies of Skin might lead me off down that route when I hadn't even known that she had that partnership. It's appearing because people are making that search and know that partnership exists. But the other place you can look for this stuff obviously is Google Trends. So I have just put the brand name in here, and there's a whole different load of spikes, but what's interesting is that some of these spikes really do correlate with in instances where Anna has posted about Allies of Skin, either on YouTube or on her blog or her Instagram. So if you are out there and you're working on these partnerships, I think this is one thing that I would really suggest is a great place for you to start. Look at the Google suggestions around your brand and the influencers that you're working with and see, are they coming up? But also look in Google Trends and look at the spikes in the data and think, was that when I mentioned that, or was that when our advert went out? Because it's a really nice, clean way, provided nothing else huge was going on. We don't quite have the context in terms of, is there something else going on with the brand? But hopefully if you work for them, you would know. But these spikes become really apparent and are great indicators of the fact that your partnerships are really working and paying off.
So I guess then on to the last question, but this is the really practical side of things. How would you do this? How would you get started in using that search data to spot talent that works best for your brand, or to get kind of inspiration around who you should work with?
So David, do you want to give away some of your secrets?
No such thing as secrets. I'm happy to share everything I've done. And if anyone wants to find out more, you're welcome to reach out and I'll share everything I've done on this front. The first thing is to recognize this is the data set that's incredibly powerful, and develop an argument for all the people that say, I don't know about that. And there's plenty of great data out there on how this is predictive. So number one, like, win over your stakeholders, get them to accept that this is important, show them some of the graphs from the marketing industry that relate this back to sales. Les Binet has done loads of public presentations on this topic in the UK. So first, win stakeholders over, get rid of the argument, this is nonsense, and show them this is useful. Next, I would gather some data for historical events that worked. So go to trends.google.com and pull trends on your most recent 2 or 3 campaigns, or your 2 or 3 partnerships, or your product versus your competitive product, something like that. Get people comfortable that this is useful to you, like in your industry. And then you can very simply, like using Google Trends, the publicly available website, you can put in the talent that you're really interested in, picking and working with. And as I said before, like a bunch of similar talent that you could otherwise work with, or even if your stakeholder isn't thinking about it, should be thinking about, force them to benchmark the talent they're interested in relative to a thoughtful selection of other talent. And just look at that data. Just take the CSV file off the Google Trends website, run it for 2 or 3 countries that are interesting, and just find like very simple patterns to do with whether your target talent is more or less popular, is growing faster or slower, is ahead or in the middle of the pack or the bottom of the pack in 2 or 3 key countries separately from each other because they're very different. And honestly, you can get an awful long way towards a really smart business decision that's infinitely more evidenced and that proves the point for this without spending a penny, and by just doing the things we've talked about already. Beyond that, there is so much investment you could do in a much better spreadsheet with like more sophisticated maths in real numbers instead of the index numbers that Google gives to you. And there's a few different methods of getting those, including a really cool keywords everywhere Chrome extension. And you can spend thousands of dollars to get them from other methods and lots of other ways. But honestly, you can get a long way there, and you can prove the case, and you can establish that this is useful and make great decisions just using Google Trends.
Yeah, so Google Trends definitely a great place to start. And the other thing that I would recommend in terms of getting started is having a play with AnswerThePublic. And again, if you're not familiar, AnswerThePublic just scrapes those Google suggestions that I just showed you in relation to Rita Ora, for example. One thing that I think is really good to do if you are working for a business that has already initiated some partnerships or had some sort of influencer or talent activity that you've run in the past, I would start with putting your business or your brand name into AnswerThePublic and have a look at the data you get back and see if those partnerships are reflected in there, because that will give you a sense of, was that good activity? Did that work? Has that kind of landed in the public consciousness long term? That's a really good thing to do. If you haven't done anything like that before, then you might want to look at some of your competitors who have and stick their name in as well, because I think that's another really great strength of search data, is that we've touched on it a few times, but it's all absolutely publicly available. So you can steal a march on insight around competition activity that your competition is doing, not just your own activity. So if you haven't done it yourself, perhaps pop a rival's name in and see if the influencer or talent partnerships that they're doing is paying off. That's always good to know. And then to think about, actually, is this something that we should be doing ourselves? Equally, if you don't want to put your brand name in, I think it's always very interesting to put celebrity talent influencer names into tools AnswerThePublic. If I put Rita Ora into AnswerThePublic, we'd see those suggestions, so the Adidas and the E advert, and I'm sure she's done lots of other partnerships, and we'd probably see those coming through as well. That's something else you can do if you are thinking, well, we might be interested in working with, what's the first thing that we should do just to sense check whether this is the right thing for us? You put their name into AnswerThePublic and you'll get a wealth of data back in terms of what the kind of shape, as we described it earlier, exists around that celebrity. And you can start to get a sense of a feel for, what are people searching about? What do they want to know? Is this someone, there might be something really controversial that comes up, and it might actually be that red flag for you to say, actually, do you know, I don't want to work with that person because there's too much risk of our brand being associated with that thing. So yeah, I would definitely, certainly on the kind of shape side of things, just start by putting names of businesses and different talent into AnswerThePublic and seeing what you get back.
Great, thanks guys. So we've got loads of really good questions coming through. Please do send them in. Gary, the founder of AnswerThePublic, he's just said hello to you guys, is in the chat. Send your questions through, because we've probably got about 10 minutes now just to run through those. So first of all, and I think this one would be for you, David, because it relates to something that you were talking about earlier in terms of some work you've been doing to help music festivals decide which artists that they want to work with. So someone has asked, how might I identify interview subjects for a podcast? So what sort of process would you go through to start thinking about that?
Oh, that's such a good question, because it's a slightly different use case that we haven't been clear enough on earlier, I think. So everything I've said was premised on the idea that you had a list of talent that you were starting with. Hey, I'm interested in this person, or maybe these people. And I said, find alternatives, by which I mean, search for the talent you're looking at on Google and see, hey, people also searched for, put them into your list. But you've asked a slightly different question, which is, hey, I haven't got a list. Tell me what the list should be. And there's a lot of different ways of going about this. And the way I found most useful is to start with someone else's list. Yeah. So start with the idea, hey, something to do with books. Who's got a top-selling book? Mm-hmm. Take the list and test them this way. Who won a book award in the last year? All right, let me just pull everyone who's won a book award and put those through. But start with a seed list and expand from there. There are lots of other ways that are more complicated, and AI can suggest you names. This is magical. But you actually have a good idea of where you might start. So maybe take everyone who's won a book award, plus anyone who's won a music award, plus anyone who's won Sports Person of the Year or who's even nominated. And then you do that a few times. That's a pretty interesting list of people. Run all those through, see who ranks high, who's growing rapidly, who's important in your countries. So my approach would be start with a list that you're seeding and that use skills and judgment to pick that list.
Great.
I would just add there that that's another really nice use case for combining search and social, like we touched on earlier as well. You may start with a list of people who their bio mentions the topic that you're interested in, and they have a certain threshold of followers, and therefore you can use other tools to help you quantify those people or identify those people, and then exactly going through that process that David's talked about. But yeah, don't think of the two as being exclusive. I think you get the best insights when you can combine those data sources.
Great, thanks guys. There's been a couple of questions that are a slightly different theme, or you might think it's completely different, but it's related in a way. So there's a couple of people that are talking about they want to get to specific groups of people rather than working with influencers. So an example here is someone wants to market long-term care insurance coverage to baby boomers. So I don't know, Sophie, if you've got any tips on how you would identify baby boomers who are searching for a particular topic or service.
So there's probably 3 parts to this answer from me. The first is that one weakness of search data is that you can't segment an audience and find how they specifically search. Previously, you were able to do that. There were tools in market that enabled you to do that, and they were great. I had some really interesting work I've done comparing how tall women search versus all women, for example. And I was actually able to segment search behavior according to height and other demographics. Those tools no longer exist. The company that provided the data closed down, I think the year before last now. You can't literally say, I'm interested in this demographic, how do they search? But what I would say is that certainly around like baby boomer audiences, and particularly audiences that are not your kind of millennials, if you like, as much as I'm sort of loath to use that word, search is a really great source of insight for them. And one of the examples that I give here is, I appreciate the person who asked the question doesn't work in this field, but if you were interested in hair care and beauty and how women, the sort of people they aspired to in that sense, I think if you looked on Instagram or on Pinterest or any social network, right, social networks are very typically biased towards certain demographics. That's just the way it is. There are different demographics that typically make more use of a certain social network. So if you went into Instagram and were looking for who are the most admired people with beautiful hair on Instagram, the people that you ended up with would be people who probably, like millennials, thought, oh, those people have great hair. If you go into Google, certainly in the UK when I do this, if I go into Google Suggests and type hairstyles, the list of people that I get back is people like Princess Diana, Thea Turner, Ruth Langsford. And again, for anyone who's not from the UK, beyond Princess Diana, you probably will know her, but the actually middle-aged daytime TV presenters, really, they're not, and I say this in a non-judgmental way, they are not your sort of stereotypical hair influencers, but what they are the women that kind of everyday women in the UK actually are interested in having hairstyles. So what Google is great for there is revealing the aspirations and the attitudes of everyday people. And that's because everyone uses Google, right? Like personally, my 70-something-year-old mother uses Google, and I think my 4-year-old niece uses Google as well. So whenever I'm looking at Google data, I am capturing the opinions of people throughout that kind of those demographics, if you like. Whereas if I jump into Instagram, I'm going to capture probably more insights relating to millennials and users of Instagram. So long-winded, but if you're looking for baby boomers, my point there is that actually Google data is a really great source of data for you because it's where you'll capture what they're doing. My third point here would just be it's difficult. You obviously can't segment and say, I'm interested in these people, how do they search? But what you can do is look at language. And if there are certain kind of key phrases that you can find that your audience uses more so than other people, you can start playing around with those in Google. It will be specific to a certain topic or certain industry, obviously. If there's a certain word or phrase that you feel your audience uses much more than anyone else, start playing with those sorts of phrases because it will help you narrow down the insights that you're getting further.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I was going to just ask as well, because a similar question, someone was asking about how you search for what specific professional roles they're looking for. And the example was ENT doctors. And I guess what you've just explained there applies in a similar way around baby boomers. So it's thinking about the words, like words.
Absolutely. And particularly with doctors and medical people, I think that's a really good example where you probably can find some sort of jargon type phrases that a professional would use, but your consumer wouldn't, and you can therefore identify out the kind of search behavior and the insights that are coming from them as opposed to your average person on the street.
Yeah, great. Okay, really great question here from Hayley. Oh, sorry, David.
I was going to say, yeah, that all was perfect, but my gut here would be you start with a different data set. You start, if you care deeply about a particular audience like this, then start with social and do social listening. Start with something like audience, and you can cluster the population and find the clusters that you're really interested in and work out what they're saying, what they're talking about, how they're behaving.
Yeah, that's a really great point as well, which I often am keen to make in these webinars, which is that, sure, we are big advocates of search data and using that more, but it doesn't mean it's always the right thing, does it? So combine it and think, is this the right data source for what I'm trying to understand?
Yeah, and if it's possible to, in a creative way to do it, then you should, because it's the biggest and it's the best. So strive for it, and it's the freest. So strive for that. Try. Don't flog a dead horse and go use social.
That was a great tip. Thank you. Okay, there's one from Hayley here, which is a really good question. So what level of influencers, so nano, micro, macro or mega, would be best to search? She's saying that I find nanos and micros super valuable for local and small business campaigns, but I find it harder to find data on them in search like this.
So if her experience is that she's finding it difficult to find data on them in search, then that's interesting, because I would suspect that it would be a good place to look in search. I think one hint I would give here is, certainly again with the AnswerThePublic type Google suggests stuff, the data that you get back will be related to where you are in the world. So there's one watch out there, / use something like AnswerThePublic, because you can start to look at, certainly at a country level, you can look at influencers in other places. You can do things like using VPNs in one country to mimic your search suggestions from Google coming back from a different location as well. So that might be one thing, because I guess the insights are going to be really small and specific here and niche. Make sure that you're looking at, particularly if it's like local stuff, make sure that you're trying to get the search suggestions coming back from the relevant location. So I'm based in Brighton on the south coast of England, but if I was looking at influencers in Liverpool in the north, and it was people who were truly influential in that Liverpool community, I probably wouldn't see a lot of search suggestion data for them at the moment, being in Brighton. Yeah, make sure that you're looking at the right location, I think. But yeah, I will put my hands up and say I'm not entirely familiar with the nano, micro, macro and mega beyond your sort of layman's understanding of those. Certainly the mega and the macro type influencers I would expect. And then the nano and micro, I guess the more niche you're getting, just make sure you're in that location to make sure that you're getting the richest insights, I think. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add, David.
All good. Okay, so what about if it's, do the same tactics work if it's a leader in a kind of professional area? So the example here is medical key opinion leaders. So not necessarily like a celebrity in their own, but still an influencer in their field.
Yeah. Yeah, everything David talked through, certainly in terms of trying to understand search volumes around them. Again, I guess the only difference here from what David took us through earlier is that your initial seed list is going to be qualified in a different way, which will be according to the industry that you're interested in. But you because you're looking at the same data points for everyone on that list, yeah, I would expect, unless, I guess the only thing that you would suffer from, I feel like this might be the case in the US, particularly in the medical field, you might have one doctor who is some sort of celebrity in some sort of way. I don't know if they featured on a TV show or something like that, and you would expect them to come out heads and tails above everyone else in that list. But you'd see that as a quirk in the data, I think, right? Everyone else you'd expect to be there and thereabouts. And yeah, I think the only difference in the use case that the person asking the question is that the seed list is more qualified, right?
Yeah, this brings us on to the conversation about other data sets as well. I'm thinking about the size and filtering and prioritizing job. If possible, it's great to have more than one data set here. And search is awesome, but if you can gather influence Instagram followers by account, then that's awesome as well. If you can gather Wikipedia page views for each person's Wikipedia page by account and line that up, having more than one data set for each influencer and looking across multiple data sets will always be better. Search is the easiest, freest, and most powerful of them all, so always start there. But maybe in the world of medicine, there's like a medical review page for doctors, and some of them have got more reviews than others, and that might be a quick and easy data set to gather to enhance or contrast or sit alongside search. So it's always worth asking, is there another data set that can go alongside this? You'll be hard pushed to find one that's better than search, but you can usually find one that enhances your understanding.
Great, thanks guys. This is a really interesting question. So can the auto-filled search keywords on the hang-down menu, e.g. the celebrity name, Sophie, that you were talking about earlier, followed by Adidas, can they be influenced by Google Ads bidding? Or is this just as an account of SEO or that kind of trending data that you were talking about earlier?
Part A of my answer is that Google is the best person to ask that question to. Google holds the keys and the answers to how and why they display the data that they do. But part 2 is no, that's not influenced, as far as we understand, by advertising. Obviously, where the advertising part comes in is where someone actually performs the search. They will then land on a Google results page, which will have, depending on what the person has searched, will have some adverts on it and some what are called natural or organic search listings, which are just websites that Google thinks are relevant to whatever it is that you've searched for. I'd split the two apart slightly. The results page that you get from Google is where the kind of tactical channel-specific activities around search marketing, whether it's paid for adverts or kind of natural search optimization, that all affects the search results page. But in terms of those suggestions that you get, that is just Google trying to be as useful as possible to the people who are using Google. And in doing that, it observes what people who have started their search in the same way that you have and are located fairly close to you. We don't know for sure what the kind of boundaries are around that, but we know certainly that people in the north of England and the south of England might get slightly different results, and certainly country to country different results. So yeah, Google is always watching what we're searching, and then if it spots someone else to start searching in a similar way, it will try and make those suggestions to shortcut them getting to exactly what they're going to search. Basically, Google is trying to make us all really lazy and not have to actually do much in terms of typing queries out. But in doing that, it also curates what is effectively trending and serves it back to us. And we as marketers or business people can use it.
Great, thank you. This is a really interesting question because it actually flips the conversation on its head. So someone's asking here, what can influencers themselves learn from this approach that would help to improve their own visibility?
I love that question.
Yeah, good one, isn't it?
Really good, yeah. So the key thing for me here would, again, come back to the shape or the colour of. So I would, if I was an influencer wanting to know more about search and my visibility, I would be sticking my name in AnswerThePublic on a regular basis. If I had the budget, I would sign up to a pro account, because then you can just track that on a regular basis without actually having to do anything, get email alerts when stuff's coming through. But I think what's really important is to understand, what are the associations that I have? What is performing really well for me? How do people search around me? I think there's another influencer that I follow who, I think her name is Kate Spears, and in lockdown at the start of last year in the UK, for anyone who's not in the UK, I don't know whether this was the case where you were, but there was a huge trend in the UK for people to bake banana bread at the start of lockdown 1. And I can recall this influencer, Kate, actually posting on Instagram herself saying, I've got so much traffic coming to my blog and I don't know why. And she did know why in the end. And it was because she had an incredible banana bread recipe and it was what people were looking for. So you would see that suggestion coming up then, because then people start searching. I think her blog's Kate Levy, and people were searching Kate Levy banana bread. I think if you can understand the shape and the colour of what's being searched for around you, then it means you can go harder on those topics and those brand associations and the content pieces that people are looking for, because they're working because people are looking for them. So you probably want to carry on creating content around those themes and those topics and that sort of thing. But I think that's just the kind of shape part of it. There's probably, like, the size part of it is equally interesting there, I think. David?
Yeah, and I think the creative interpretation of the shape data as well, because if something's popular, does that mean you do more of it? Or does that mean you stop doing it?
Yeah, are you done?
and what's missing? Like, why is nobody searching for me plus reports? No one thinks I've written any interesting reports then, haven't I? That's because it's missing in the data. So what's missing, that's why you need someone like Sophie to be really creative about the interpretation of it. And on the size data, I don't know. Just keep your eye on it compared to your peers and look for patterns.
Yeah, I think the patterns and the trending thing is very interesting there as well, because the more you can understand even just your brand being yourself or your blog's name, the trends in people searching just for that term are probably going to be quite interesting. You could look at when was I most searched for and what was I doing in that month, what landed with people. I think there's another interesting thing here, which is that if you have a brand that you want to work with, like a dream collaboration, there's probably a really good argument for using search data to help you make your claim to them and say, guys, I really get how people are searching around you, and I know that it's product X or it's your whatever content series it is that you do that works really well, and I think I could feed into it in this way. But you can start to use search data probably to prove to them that you understand how people search for them, and therefore how you could enhance that further.
Great, thank you. It's also, that's conversation just then has given me an idea. So we have just launched, as part of Answer the Public, a free market research area of the site. So we're in the process of adding thousands of brands and organisations to it. But if you're interested in seeing how the kind of search data changes around celebrities, haven't done this yet, but we will add a list of some of the world's top celebrities in there. So Gary, if you could pop it in the chat, that would be brilliant. But this data updates weekly. So yeah, you'll see the differences on a weekly basis in Answer the Public. We'll add that this week as well to help you out. Cool. So I think we've got time for a couple more questions. David, I know that you had to go. Have you got time to hang on, or yeah, all good? Okay, great. So there's just a couple more questions. So does Google Trends incorporate Google Home questions? So this is slightly different off the topic, but I think it'd be a good one just to cover off while we're on the session today.
So this is the voice search question, right? I think we get this quite often. It does, as far as we know. It doesn't. What it doesn't do is segment it out in any sort of way. So you can't look at a pile of search data and say, these are ones that people have actually asked the smart speaker in their home versus these are the ones that people have typed. You can't do that. You can spot them sometimes, because sometimes you will see funny suggestions. I'm going to say it, and this always sets off people's smart speakers in their home. But if you say, hey Google, and then you have your search query, sometimes in search data, you'll see a query that starts with, hey Google. And you'll obviously have an indication then that it's been spoken as opposed to typed. But yeah, it includes it as far as we know, but it doesn't separate it out. So it's all lumped together.
Great, thank you. A question here about LinkedIn. Do you guys know much about how you can search for, or how people will find you on LinkedIn? Is that something that you guys have worked on before? No.
Sorry, LinkedIn search data?
Yeah, so the question here was, do you know what keywords people use to find you on LinkedIn? Like how?
No idea.
I guess you could probably think about some of the tactics that you guys have been talking through. So search around a particular topic that is your area of specialism, that kind of thing, and to see what other influencers on LinkedIn that are similar to you are appearing for.
Yeah, and I do often say that the suggestions element of what I talk about, a lot of websites use that same sort of suggestions principle, if you like. Amazon or YouTube, any of those, you'll start typing something and the website will try and predict what it is that you're going to search for. So you can use the same principles in terms of LinkedIn to see what's trending in terms of searches and what's popular in terms of search in LinkedIn. I suppose if people are actually finding you, it's, probably, I think a few people are saying it in the chat, but it's it's the words you've got in your title and your job title. But I don't think there's any like big publicly available data sets around LinkedIn. There are Google search.
Great, thank you. Okay, and one last question, which I guess is a slightly different way of thinking about this topic, is what's the best tip for new product research in Answer the Public, which I guess is similar. It's thinking about a celebrity like in combination with a topic. So if you're actually, in combination with a product, but if you're actually thinking about the product first, how do you start searching for insights around that in Answer the Public?
So my best tips there are the words with, without, and so you get those automatically. Those words are built in as branches into Answer the Public reports. So if you put in a product, so if I put high heels into Answer the Public, or chocolate, I like chocolate better than high heels. If you put chocolate into Answer the Public, one of the branches that would come out is chocolate with, another branch you would get is chocolate without, and another one you would get is chocolate. And if you're looking at this data for product development, I think those are three really important places to look, because the with branch tells you specifically what types of things people want in their chocolate. So you might see things like chocolate with nuts, chocolate with fruit in, chocolate with popping candy, whatever it is, the ingredients that people are really looking for with their chocolate will appear in there. Equally without tells you what people don't want. So chocolate without gluten, chocolate without dairy, chocolate without fat, I don't know, chocolate without calories, I'm sure that exists. So you'll see those things. And chocolate like tells you effectively who are the brands or the products that are winning the most in your category at the moment, because you'll see things like, again, in the UK, you would see chocolate like Cadbury's, chocolate like Galaxy, which are two brands of chocolate in the UK. Really poor American chocolate knowledge, but you might see something like chocolate like Hershey's. You'd see all those sorts of things. What you could then do is curate that set of brands that are winning, or the products that are winning, and actually then do some further analysis and look at, well, what is it that they have? Why are they doing so well? Yeah, quite simple, but put your product thing in to answer the public, and look at with, look at without, and look at, and you're definitely going to get some insights for the sorts of products that you want to be creating from those three areas.
I would say, like with all good qualitative research, once you've got your inspiration and your headlines, then put them back into the quant again. So take, people are interested in chocolate and popping candy. Oh my God, I never would have thought of that. Ask yourself, hey, what else is wacky and is in the family of popping candy? What are all the other things that might go in that list, but there aren't there right now? Let me go check. How popular is popping candy these days? Is it on a resurgence? And challenge yourself to come up with a list of things that are like it. Hey, are they popular in size terms? Because then you'll find things that maybe no one's searching for or no one's associating. But you know what? It's bound to be the next big thing, because in and of itself, it's rising. And so obviously it should go in chocolate.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, guys. That's all we've got time for today. Some brilliant questions that came through there, and all of the information that you've given today has been absolutely brilliant. So thank you, Sophie and David, for your time. Just to let everyone in the room know, we have recorded this session. As you signed up, you will get the recording, and it will also be added to our YouTube channel tomorrow. So our next webinar is happening in about a month's time, and it's going to be about using search listening and search data to help you track a campaign or to deal with crisis or reputation management. So that'll be our next webinar. We do run them monthly, sometimes a couple of times a month, but you'll get all the details as well about that next webinar as you signed up to this one. And yeah, all the information is on the Answer the Public website as well. So if you click on the Learn tab in the top nav, then our webinars hub is there too. So yeah, please just let us know what you thought of today's webinar. We're at Answer the Public. We'd love to hear your feedback and just get involved in the conversation about search listening with the hashtag search listening. So yeah, huge thank you again, David and Sophie. It's been brilliant having you guys on the webinar today.
Thank you, really enjoyed it, and thanks for sticking around with the sound issues as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.